The profitability of co-working businesses is a big topic. We might be just scratching the surface here, but I'm going to provide you with benchmarks, advice on how to unlock new revenue streams, as well as the main KPIs to look at when it comes to keeping costs down. Now, to do this, we teamed up with the amazing Abigail Schilling, who runs several co-working spaces and is also working as a co-working consultant. You can also find some of her insights in our blog post. Now, there is a general idea that it's hard for co-working spaces to turn profitable, but data shows that consistently throughout the years, the number of spaces that manage to break even and turn profits has been steadily increasing. So when we zoom in to 2023 data, you can see that 46% of co-working spaces are not profitable, but an additional 30% is actually breaking even. So only 25% of spaces are losing money. Of course, one thing to consider is the average time that businesses have been open for. So when a new co-working space opens in the first year of activity, or maybe the first 2 years, it's very unlikely to hit profitability. So now that the market is more mature and the average time on market of the spaces is higher, you can see that this is reflected in terms of profitability levels. Now, turning profitable is just a yes or no checkbox. One other factor to consider is the margins that co-working spaces have. So among profitable spaces, profitable businesses, it is quite common to have a 10% margin. This is again an average, so it's not a rule, but the margins are somewhat thin on average, but the number of spaces that are breaking even and turning profitable has never been higher. Now, obviously, you have revenue and you have costs. And the one thing that is impacting both is operations. So let's take a look at the core KPIs for resource planning. When we talk about resource planning, it can be anything from the amount of staff you have, investments in technology, investments in the physical space, the actual setup of your space. So things you'll want to look at are resource utilization rate and space occupancy. So how many of your fixed or flex desks are currently occupied, the same for private offices, the same for common areas, meeting rooms, all of that. The average member retention, that's very important, and it's also important to segment it by either membership tier or type of membership. Operating expenses per square foot, again, ideally with a breakdown of the nature of those expenses. Acquisition costs and lifetime value. So once you have the average member retention, you can combine it with the average revenue per member, come up with a lifetime value, and benchmark that against how much it costs you to acquire new members, whether that's individuals or companies leasing an office. Now, there is obviously a lot more that you can track, but these are some of the very basic and most important things that you will want to keep track of, maybe on a quarterly basis or at least on a regular basis. When it comes to revenue, obviously the working model is largely shaped around membership revenues. You're charging for people using your space through offices, desks, common areas, maybe virtual memberships as well. However, there is more to that. So it's quite common that 70, 80%, sometimes even more of the revenue comes from membership fees. But I want to show you which other revenue streams successful co-working spaces have been able to unlock. New revenue streams can come from your community, from your members, or from the outside world. So event hosting, that's something that would apply to both. You can rent out certain common areas for events, whether that's meetup, talks, private events, whatever that may be. It's even better if this is in line with the positioning of your space. So if you're focused on startups, then maybe hosting events that are technology or startup related has a double benefit. So you're both monetizing and you're creating something interesting for your community. Anyway, other examples of ways you can monetize the space would be meeting room bookings. Again, this can be for members or for the outside world. So allowing anyone to rent one of your meeting rooms for an hour, a day, whatever that may be. The same is true for more unique type of spaces. Let's say you have a room for podcast or video shooting, or if you're a creative space, maybe it's something else. That's also something that it's somewhat easy to monetize if you're able to advertise it correctly. Additional services, this really could be anything you're offering to your members. It could be food, drinks, advisory services, anything like that. And another one is sponsorship. This is maybe a little bit more complex, but once you have like a large community in place, you have events going on, it might be easy to find sponsorship opportunities from the ecosystem. Now we talked about revenue, now it's time to talk about costs. In order to control and keep costs down, you need to first be able to have an overview of where your main expenses are in relation to the value they bring to the business. So certain things are necessary, others there might be room for optimization. Automating manual workflows is one of the most common action items that presents room for optimization. So you have co-working management software that can, first of all, integrate with the rest of your stack, and second of all, automate a lot of things that are otherwise done manually by your team. An example is if your team is spending time issuing key cards or opening the door for visitor or day pass members or anything like that. Those are all things that could be automated through technology. But really anything from invoices to answering users' requests to manual maintenance tasks, these are things that community managers and co-working operators unfortunately have to spend a lot of time on. So being able to effectively reduce the amount of work that can be then allocated to higher value activities like building a community or marketing and sales initiatives or events, anything like that, that's obviously beneficial. Aside from the lease of the space, one of the biggest expenses is actually your team, your headcount. So in that sense, it's important to being able to effectively decide when to keep things in-house, marketing, IT, whatever that may be, versus outsource them. And also making sure that your team is well structured, efficient, and that you're ultimately working with the right amount of resources, not too little, but also not too much. Now, obviously, this is just a top level overview. There is so much more that could be said about cost, about unlocking new revenue streams, about how the most successful co-working businesses have been able to reach profitability and what those profitability levels look like. We'll keep on creating content on this topic. We'll have some initiatives coming up, so I hope you will join us soon. Take care.